All right. Well, welcome to all of you who are joining us here for our special program as part of our design challenge, our spring design challenge here at the National Medal of Honor Heritage Center. My name is Miranda Wilkinson. I'm the director of education here, and we're really excited about this challenge. This challenge could not be possible without the generous support of Dr. June Scobie Rogers. And we're just really excited to see what all of our teams are going to come up with. We have over 100 teams across the nation who have entered this design challenge, and we're really excited to see what comes out of it. So very quickly, I do want to, as kind of to start this off, just kind of send out a couple of reminders. We do have some people that are joining us here, and this is being recorded. We will share this with student teams who are registered for this, and so they will get the information as well. But we wanted to provide, some opportunities to have some additional background on this topic. Not everyone knows about the Shuttle Challenger. The disaster occurred in 1986, and so we're looking at this piece of history. And so part of this design challenge is to ensure that students, or the challenge itself is to expose students to this history, but also have students take on a real career world role of being a museum exhibit designer. Most people don't know that this is an actual role that can be pursued, a career that can be pursued, and it involves a lot of STEM, a lot of design and engineering. You have to go through this process. There's a lot of creativity and art that comes along with it too. So we're really excited about this design challenge. As you can see here, we have some pretty big figures associated with the winning teams, up to $10,000 for our high school students, and then 1,000 per groups that you see there for elementary school, and then 5,000 for middle school. So I just wanted to highlight some of this again for those who may be joining that aren't fully familiar with our design challenge. But I do want to highlight this too, the schedule. So our teams have registered. That registration closed on February 12th. The very next submission that needs to occur is on March 8th. So this challenge actually has multiple rounds associated with it. We have rubrics that will be utilized to score each of these submissions. So the round one video proposal is due March 8th. And then the announcement will be made March 15th. The second round video presentation for those teams that advance to the second round will be April 15th, and that announcement will be made on April 22nd. And those who make it through the April 22nd round will be competing in the final competition, which will occur May 18th, right here on site, here at the Heritage Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So again, this design challenge allows student teams to take on one of these options that they want to pursue. So option one is honoring the Challenger 7. Option two is recognizing all Space Medal of Honor recipients. And option three is to inspire future generations. So as you're thinking about your designs, and our students have had to kind of submit a really short draft or a small draft of kind of what they think their design might be. Again, we completely recognize that these designs will morph and change. That's part of the design engineering process. So we are not holding you to that exact design that was initially submitted, but just know we have seen them, and we are looking forward to see these designs, turn into actual products. But as you can see, for each of these options, we supplied our students with links that they can take to learn a little more about this history. But we're so very excited to be kind of extending this learning experience. Here are our rubrics that I mentioned again. We're so very excited to be extending this learning experience to include Will Bryan, who is part of NASA's SLS program. And I'm going to quickly read you his bio, his short bio that he'll be included, and then he will take it away. Again, we wanted to provide additional learning opportunities to our student teams. And, what better way than to go straight to the source of NASA and to have a representative here with us. And we're so very thankful that Will is going to be joining us. So, Will is a communications strategist and technical writer for NASA's Space Launch System program. You'll often see this as SLS. AK rocket translator. In his role, he helps develop messaging and a wide array of products to include papers, articles, and presentations that help tell the incredible story of the SLS rocket, the Artemis campaign, and NASA's space exploration endeavors. During the Artemis 1 mission, Bryan and his team monitored the mission communications loops, providing 24/7 tracking of the countdown and launch to help best keep the public informed with launch progress. Prior to training with the SLS team, he was a website editor and writer supporting NASA's Office of Chief Technologist and NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Additionally, he was one of the broadcast hosts for NASA's Human Exploration Rover Challenge and NASA's Student Launch, two of NASA's Artemis Student Challenges. Before NASA, he was a crew trainer at Space Camp there in Huntsville, Alabama, and was blessed to teach more than 1,000 campers of all ages during his 15 months there at the center. Bryan is a second generation member of the NASA team following his father, who has 45 years of continuing with NASA. He has a bachelor's degree in geology from Mississippi State University and a master's degree in space and planetary sciences from the University of Arkansas. So welcome, Will Bryan. We are so very excited to have you here with us. And I will say, as I was reading your bio, I cannot express how well your role really connects to what we're doing here, because when you think of designing museum exhibits, you've got someone that's actually doing the work, right? You've got people, you've got engineers, you've got someone designing and prototyping. But you also have to tell the story of what's happening. You need people who can communicate. And that's one of those, obviously, those 21st century skills, a professional skill that students really need. And so you're like the mouthpiece. You have these engineers who are back doing this work, but you're helping us realize what's happening. You're putting it into word and story form, and stories inspire people. And that's what we hope to do with our museum exhibit here. We hope to inspire people. That's kind of our why here at our center, to inspire all generations to be the best versions of themselves. And you're doing it. You're the storyteller for NASA. So it's a really cool, occupation, cool career that maybe some students have never thought about. So we're excited to have you to learn more about the program, but obviously learn more about what you do in amongst this. So I'm going to go ahead and just let you take it away.
All right. Well, hey, I really appreciate it. And listen to all those different things I've done. It's getting to do a lot of cool different things. And one of the important things is with our field and what we do here to return people to the moon with an incredible rocket like the Space Launch System and to get us on to Mars, we absolutely need everybody. And I'm going to talk about this a lot more. Sorry, y'all, got coworkers coming in. So we're going to be telling you all about the different career fields, what we're doing with Artemis, and how we're going to get back to the moon. Yo, I'm one of the weird ones. I grew up in the space program. As it was said, my dad has worked for NASA for 45 years. He was 8 years old when he realized that he wanted to be a part of the space program, and has done that. He is about to turn 70, and I don't think he'll ever retire, because from my dad going to work is going to his playground. He gets to build stuff. He sent stuff into space. We've seen space shuttle launches. It's just an absolutely exciting field. And I tell people there's nobody has more passion for the space program than I've ever met in my life than my dad. And I got just a little bit of that from him. So I'm going to turn off my video to help save some bandwidth, but I want to talk about these two pictures here on the slide to get us going. The reason these two pictures are up first, because they embody two things that I think are absolutely critically important to both the success of spaceflight and anything else you want to do. That first picture you can see there, that's me in front of SLS. It was not a particularly great morning. We had just scrubbed. We were supposed to fly the night before, and we weren't able to. But being that close and being a part of that incredible team, knowing what that rocket was about to do, It was absolutely incredible. I was just a couple hundred yards away from the pad, and one of the most enthralling experiences of my life. Along with passion, teamwork takes you everywhere. And you can see there, those are two of my teammates, two of my awesome teammates. And if you notice, the launch pad behind us is missing the rocket. It didn't go anywhere that we didn't know about. It actually launched that night before. And as you'll hear, we launched at 1:47 in the morning. That picture was taken about 5 o'clock in the evening. We were really tired, but it was awesome. So let's go to the next slide. That rocket that we launched, that you see on the picture, and I'm about to show you a video of it, is the Artemis 1 mission, the first step to our return to the moon. So let's watch this really, really cool video. So now everything you saw in that video happened over the course of about 2 hours. The majority of it happening in about the first 8.5 minutes. And it's our first step, as we said, to go back to the moon. And we get the question a lot of, why do we go back to the moon? I mean, after all, haven't 12 people already walked on the moon? Well, yeah, but we explored a very, very small portion of it. We go to the moon to learn how to live and work on other worlds. Next slide, please. The Apollo program absolutely changed the world. Not only did we rewrite history books, rewrite science books, we developed technologies that we use today. Things like memory foam, things like the emergency space blanket. All of that stuff came out of our necessity to go explore. But along with Apollo, we also inspired generations not just to become engineers or scientists, fighter pilots, and astronauts, but to believe that absolutely anything was possible. And Artemis is going to do the same, but this time we're doing a little bit differently. Next slide, please. This time we're going back to stay. Under the Artemis program, we're going to build and develop a sustainable, permanent presence on the lunar South Pole and in lunar orbit so that we can test technologies and go to Mars. Next slide. And that is the goal of Artemis. Now, Artemis, that name was also picked very, very deliberately because Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo, the goddess of the moon, representing that all of us are going back. Next slide, please. On November 16th, 2022, at 1:47 in the morning, we launched the Space Launch System rocket for the very first time. The Artemis generation, the generation that is going to take us back to the moon and on to Mars, the generation that you all are a part of, was underway. Next slide. So why do we explore? Now, this is an acronym that I use because I like to go explore with my friends, and Misty is one of my friends. So when we look at the moon and Mars, where there's an innate desire to explore. It's the same reason you are taking part in this challenge. It's the reason you like to go ride your bike or go hike trails, go explore different amusement parks. We have this desire to go explore, to go experience, and to go and learn. And speaking of learning, scientific discovery, I'm going to hit on this one a little bit more because I'm a geology nerd and I love rocks, and the moon is a terrific treasure trove of geology. But when we go explore, we learn things about those environments that teach us not just about that specific spot, but helps us learn about where we came from and what other areas might be like. We develop technology, things that change the world, things like the cell phone, the cameras in your cell phone, memory foam. We have water filtration systems that came out of the space program that we can take into third world countries and help them when they've had a bad earthquake. Space shuttle missions actually found water in one of the most arid portions of the world and allowed the people living there to have clean water when we didn't even think that was possible. So technology developments absolutely changes the world. And then last, as you guys are participating in this incredible challenge, is to inspire generations. We want people to come join the space program, but we also want people to believe that if they roll up their sleeves, they work hard, they work with teammates, that absolutely anything is possible. And that's what we prove when we explore space. Next slide, please. Now I talk about geology and I talk about scientific discovery. The moon is an absolutely fascinating place. I call it our archive or our library of the early solar system. See, here on Earth, we have things like rain and we have wind and we have plate tectonics that change rocks. In fact, there in Chattanooga and down here in Huntsville, we had some pretty good rain roll through this morning. All of those things change rocks. They hide what they were originally like. But the moon never really had an atmosphere to affect that kind of weathering on rocks. It doesn't have plate tectonics to erase and to change the rocks into new things. Really, the only thing that happens on the moon to change rocks are big impacts. And so when we go to the moon, we can actually study the very earliest days of the solar system. We can learn how it formed, we can learn how the Earth formed, and we can learn about how rocky bodies form just by going to the moon. Next slide, please. But how are we going to do it? And I know there's a lot on this slide, so I want to focus your eyes on two different areas. First, you have what I call the swoosh part up top with our capsule, and then we have the lander area down there on the surface. And we'll start with the upper part. We're sending a series of missions. The first couple would just be flyby missions and orbital missions to go by the moon to get our astronauts out into deep space and test out our systems. We're going to be building up a scientific space station in lunar orbit called the Gateway. As we're doing that, we're also going to be sending astronauts down to the surface so they can collect samples. But we're also sending robotic explorers ahead of us. In fact, there's one on the moon right now. It landed last Thursday, I believe, Intuitive Machines. We send these robots in advance of us so that we can collect data, collect information, so that when we put our astronauts down there on the surface, that we're sending them to the best places they can be to be successful. So when we look at Artemis exploring the moon, it's not robots or humans, it is robots and humans. And I think that's really, really cool. Next slide, please. Our destination is the lunar South Pole. When our Apollo astronauts went to the moon, they mostly stayed around the equator for a lot of reasons. We're going to the lunar South Pole for a lot of reasons. In fact, if you look at that picture, you can see there's a lot of dark areas, and those dark areas are our shadows. We have data from spacecraft that have been in orbit around the moon that says we think there's a lot of water down below the surface. And just like when you're settling a new area, you want to go where the water is because water is the source of life. We need it to drink, we need it to clean. And when we go look at space exploration, we can use it as rocket fuel. Excuse me. So we're going to where the water is. Those dark shadow regions are some of the absolute coldest places in the solar system. Some of these areas have not seen sunlight in 4 billion years. So that's where the water is. So that's where we're going to go. Next slide, please. But why the moon? And why not just go on straight to Mars? Well, the short answer is Mars is really hard. Well, let's look at the three areas where we currently explore or are about to explore with humans. Low Earth orbit, the International Space Station, 250 miles up, not too far away, still pretty hard, going 17,500 miles an hour. In fact, if you walk out on some nights, you can actually see it fly over your hometown. It's really awesome. Make sure you do that. Something happens, we can generally get our crews back pretty quickly, just a few hours. The moon, about 240,000 miles away. It's 1,000 times further than where the space station is. In fact, if you wanted to go 240,000 miles on Earth, you would have to go around the equator 10 times. But when we look at space, it's still pretty close. About 3 days to get, 3 to 5 days to get there, 3 or so days to get back. So if something happens, we can get supplies there. We have really good communication with the moon. So not impossible. But when we look at Mars, we're talking a completely different ballgame. Mars, at its best, is 40 million miles away. With current propulsion, it's going to take us 6 to 9 months just to get there, and then another 6 to 9 months to get back. When we commit our astronauts to go to Mars, we're not hitting the next exit ramp and turning around if something doesn't go right or if we forgot something. And that's what brings us back to the moon. Because we're close enough that we can test a lot of these technologies in what seem like a distant location. We can simulate a lot of different portions of being 40 million miles away without actually taking the risk of being that far away. So the moon is our test bed to get ready for Mars. Next slide, please. Mars is the ultimate goal. This beautiful planet, so many million miles away, it's your generation that's going to get us there. I'm just hoping I can be around to help tell the story. Next slide, please. So how are we going to explore? Well, here are the basics, and I'm going to go into each one of them. Our primary rocket is the Space Launch System. It's the SLS. It's what I work for. It's what my team works on. Our ground systems, rocket doesn't launch if you can't put fuel in it, and you don't have a launch pad for it. So those are our launch complex portions down at 39B down in Florida. Our Orion spacecraft and Gateway will be our primary spacecraft. We have a couple of different landers that will be used depending on which mission we're flying. And then extravehicular activity, also known as moonwalks. We've got new spacesuits, rovers, and all kinds of cool tools being developed right now to help us explore. Next slide. Let's talk about my baby. I love this thing, and I love this picture. This is a Space Launch System rocket. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. This beast of a rocket stands 322 feet tall, weighs almost 6 million pounds at liftoff, and generates more thrust, more power than even the mighty Saturn V that took our first missions to the moon. Depending on the version we fly of it, we have an upper stage that does a couple of different burns. We can launch the Orion spacecraft, but we can also launch we can launch other things as needed. And then a fun fact for you: you see that center portion? It's orange. It's because we use a foam to keep our propellants that are super cold inside the tanks. Well, as that foam and as is exposed to UV, like you are when you go out to the beach, it tans. So our rocket, just like you, tans in the sun. Next slide, please. So this is what we call the expanded chart, and I'm going to go through it in some detail. We have the center core stage there, built by our partners at Boeing. That piece alone is 212 feet long, weighs 188,000 pounds empty, and we store more than 733,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen in those tanks. We have 4 engines at the bottom of SLS at the core stage that will drain that 733,000 gallons in about 8.5 minutes. Now, while that sounds like a really thirsty engine, if the engine in your parents' car was as efficient as an RS-25, it would actually fit in the palm of your hand. It is an incredible engine. That stage combined produces about 2 million pounds of thrust. But remember, we weigh almost 6 million. So we need more power to get off the pad, and we need more power to get accelerated into the moon. So we have two solid rocket boosters. If you've ever seen the space shuttle, they look really familiar. They are. We use a shuttle heritage hardware with another propellant segment to give us more power. Each one of these burns 11,000 pounds of propellant per second. So imagine what like 5 cars weighs. That's how much mass we're burning. Each booster is burning per second for about 2 minutes. They give us about 75% of the thrust to get off the launch pad and then moving. And after about 2 minutes, they're out of propellant and we separate from them. Moving up the rocket, we have the launch vehicle stage adapter. And while that looks like a really small piece of the rocket, that piece alone is taller than a 2-story house. It's huge. We have our upper stage, what we call the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. We'll fly this on our first version. And just an absolutely incredible stage built just down the road from where I am in Decatur, Alabama. Then we have one more small piece before we reach what we consider the top of the rocket, and that's called the Orion stage adapter. Just about 5 feet tall, we can actually fly CubeSats in that piece alone. So next slide, please. But I've alluded to it, this is just the first version. Just like cars have upgrades and have more powerful versions that get worked, and your cell phones and computers do, we do as well. So we're actually working on the next version, what we call the Block 1B. That allows us to send more stuff to the moon in one launch. And then our Block 2, that will allow us to send even more. So it's all about getting more payload to deep space destinations. So we can reduce mission complexity and mission risk with that. Next slide, please. All right, but the rocket doesn't launch if you don't have a launch pad, if you don't have a way to put all the pieces together, if you don't have the important computers that tell it to launch. And that's what our friends and our partners with the Exploration Ground Systems do. You can see that picture was taken the very first time we ever rolled SLS out of the vehicle assembly building. And it's hard to put into words how huge the vehicle assembly building is. There's an American flag on the other side of that building. The star field on that American flag is the size of an NBA basketball court. That building is absolutely huge. Now, there's a smaller building down there to the left, and that looks really small. That building alone is 4 stories tall. That is where our launch control center is. So a lot of the team members who configure the rocket and tell it to, if you've heard the famous go, no-go poll, a lot of those team members sit in that building during launch. Next slide, please. But a rocket needs something to launch. And so in our case, we launched the Orion spacecraft. This is where our astronauts will ride to space. And just a truly terrific spacecraft, bigger than Apollo. And let's talk about it a little bit more on the next slide, please. So when we look at the Orion spacecraft, we have a few main components. And I'll start right there in the center with the crew module, that shiny portion. That is where our astronauts ride. That is where they live. That is where they sleep. It's where they exercise. That's also where they use the bathroom. Our Artemis 2 crew that you're going to hear about here, they're going to be having 4 astronauts spend 10 days in that. They're not going anywhere else outside that capsule during their mission. Going to the left, we have their service module. That's where things like their steering, what we call the reaction control system, all the steering engines are there. Solar arrays expand to generate power. Oxygen tanks so they can breathe. All of that is in the service module. And then to the right of our crew module is our launch abort system. I call it the uh-oh stick. This system is there in case something happens during the first 3 minutes of launch. It can actually fire and pull our crew off the rocket and get them to safety. After about 3 minutes or so, Orion can abort by itself. Maintaining safety for our crew is absolute #1 priority. I hope we never have to use that, because if it did, it means the rocket didn't do something quite right. So we never plan to use it, but we always have to be prepared. Next slide, please. Our astronauts will be going to the gateway. We're going to start building up the gateway at our fourth launch. And so our astronauts will actually fly in Orion, they'll launch on SLS, get out of Earth's atmosphere, go to the moon, dock with Gateway. Two of them will go to our lander, and then from the lander, they'll go down to the surface. And then to come home, it's just the exact reverse. They'll launch off the moon, come to Gateway, climb back in Orion, and come back home. Next slide, please. So we have two different versions of two different landers being developed right now. One of them is built by SpaceX. They're building what they call a Starship, that they're getting ready to do some more, hopefully another flight test here quite soon. And the next version you'll see on the next slide, please, is developed by a Blue Origin-led national team. Looks very different. This shows that we get to have ingenuity, we get to have innovation, creativity to explore the moon, and it's absolutely vital that we have that. Next slide, please. Once we get down to the surface, we need to be able to go collect rocks because you have geologists that are hungry for rocks. We need to understand how the moon formed. We need to understand if that water that's on the moon, if it's really safe for our astronauts to drink. And so we're going to get there. We have new suits being developed. We have new what we call unpressurized rovers, like the one there on the right, kind of like your ATV. But we're also working with teams to develop pressurized rovers so that the astronauts don't have to be in a spacesuit to operate them. That will really expand how far they can go explore while down there on the surface. So we have to get there. We have to have the right tools so that we can go collect all the samples and bring some excellent samples home to learn from them. Next slide, please. So Artemis 1, the first step to all of that. We launched an uncrewed spacecraft on a 25-day mission to go around the moon. The number one job was to test the heat shield. When we bring our astronauts home, we have to make sure that they can withstand the heat of reentry, because you can see there it gets almost 5,000 degrees. We have to slow down from almost 25,000 miles an hour. Before we put our astronauts on board, we need to make sure the heat shield works. We also need to test all of SLS's systems. That was the very first flight of that rocket, and traditionally, launch vehicles have about a 50-50 shot of failure the first time. Before we put our astronauts on board, we wanted to test it to make sure that it worked. Once we got Orion out into deep space, we needed to make sure that we needed to understand how it performed. We do a lot of computer modeling to predict how we think it's going to do, but until you get up in that environment, you don't really completely know. We needed to, of course, recover Orion. That's what the picture there on the right is. You can see the recovery ship out in the back and some of our Navy partners there in a small boat just offshore. And then we needed to test all of our ground processing, make sure that we can fuel the rocket and get it ready to launch as well. Next slide, please. Now, you guys have taken tests undoubtedly in school, and I remember after I take a test, one of the first questions my parents asked when I got home was, well, how did you do? Not only did we have to fly the mission, we had to grade ourselves. And that's what we have been doing. And we actually completed that grading last summer. So it took us about 6 months. The great thing is all the data indicate that SLS is ready to fly astronauts on Artemis 2. For a first flight of a launch vehicle, it went incredibly well. So you can see the boosters performed flawlessly. The core stage, we inserted into an orbit with the orbital parameter of our furthest distance from Earth was about 975 miles. We were off that by less than 3 miles. And then I talked to our chief engineer a good bit, and one of the parameters he always points out is how much energy did we get, and how close were we? Well, we were targeting 25,500 some odd feet per second. We were slower than that by 6.5 feet. 99.074% accurate for the very first time we've ever launched this rocket. SLS flew incredibly well. The challenge becomes now we have to go do it again. Next slide, please. Some pictures of the launch. I was 3.5 miles away when we launched, and I could have read my notebook from the propellant or from the light of the engines alone. And to give you an idea of how powerful this was, 3.5 miles away, my pennant legs flapped from the force of the rocket at liftoff. An absolutely incredible vehicle, an absolutely incredible experience, one that I hope all of you get to experience one day. Next slide, please. I always say rockets don't launch themselves. People launch rockets. The teamwork that is required to launch and to perform a mission of this caliber is truly hard to describe. These are just some of the faces that helped us launch. There were hundreds of people all across the country that were online and on their consoles rotating through for more than 2 days before launch. And you can see the picture on the far right. You have Mr. Jeremy Gruber. He was there in the Ford. And then the boss of launch operations was Charlie Blackwell Thompson. And you can see her in the background. Absolutely incredible people and an incredible team. Rockets don't launch rockets. People do. Next slide, please. So with SLS launched, with our job done, how did Orion do? Well, Orion's mission went so smooth that we actually added 19 objectives during the mission. To give you an idea what that's like, it's like you're taking a test and your teacher walks by and looks over your shoulder and sees that you're doing really, really well. So they decide to add 20 questions to your test in the middle of it. That's really what we did. The heat shield and reentry systems performed extremely well. We got experienced temperatures upwards of 5,000 degrees as we slowed down from 25,000 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour in just about 20 minutes. The in-space systems, so our propellant systems and our electrical systems, we actually used less propellant than we expected. We generated more power from the sun than we expected, and we used less. That all allowed us to splash down on December 11th, 2022, about 11 a.m. Next slide, please. These are some pictures from the mission. This particular picture was taken from its farthest point. You can see both the Earth and the Moon in this picture. Every footstep that has ever been taken is in this very picture. We are some 38,000 miles beyond Earth, the furthest any spacecraft designed for humans has ever gone before. And you can see down there below the solar array, that's Earth. That's all of us in that tiny little marble. Next slide, please. Orion flew a bunch of experiments inside. There in that left seat, that is not an astronaut. That is Commander Munikin Campos. He was a mannequin that we flew, outfitted with all kinds of different sensors so that we could analyze the environment that they were flying through. We had a Callisto experiment, which is kind of like Alexa for Orion, where the public was actually able to engage with it and take part of that. So there's always opportunities to engage with these missions. My personal favorite, you can see him down there below this blue screen. We flew Snoopy. I love Snoopy, and he's been a part of the space program for many, many years. So it was great to see him make another return to the moon. Next slide, please. One of my all-time favorite pictures of any picture that we've taken from space. We were about 5 days away from splashdown. We had to come back from the moon. We had to do a burn to get us out of lunar orbit. And as we did that burn and the camera started to come around, this picture was captured. You can see the moon there on the left, and then the Earth is that crescent. We always think of the moon as having a crescent phase. When you're on the moon, the Earth does too. So all of us are in that crescent, 240,000 miles from where this picture is taken. Next slide, please. So what's next? Well, what's next is to send 4 brave astronauts on a lunar flyby mission. They won't actually land. We're going to put them in an Orion spacecraft. We're going to send them into a high Earth orbit, check out all the systems. They've got a few tasks they need to do, like test flying the spacecraft. And then we're going to send them around the moon on what we call a free return trajectory. Basically, that means we're going to light the engine and we're going to let physics do what physics does. We'll use the gravity of the moon to actually slingshot us around the moon and send us back to Earth. And our brave astronauts, you can see there, sitting is Commander Reed Wiseman. Standing to his left is Mission Specialist Christina Cook. Our pilot is standing behind Reed, Victor Glover. And then to the right of Reed is Jeremy Hansen. He is one of our Canadian astronauts. He will be the first international person to go to the moon. An absolutely incredible crew. I've gotten to meet a couple of them. I promise you they're going to have fun. They're going to make you proud as we go fly this mission. Next slide, please. So this is what that mission profile looks like. There's a lot going on here, but you can see we'll launch out of Kennedy Space Center out of Florida. We'll go into Earth orbit. We'll do some testing, what we call a proximity operations demonstration, and then we'll go fly by the moon. And then a few days later, splash down off the coast of California. Next slide, please. The Artemis 2 crew, they all say that their number one job is to prepare for Artemis 3. They want to collect samples or collect data. They want to learn lessons to pass on to their colleagues who will fly Artemis 3. Those astronauts who will be the first ones to walk on the surface of the moon since 1972. That mission is going to be about collecting samples, but it's also going to be about testing the human landing system as well. Just as we test SLS and Orion, we need to test the landing system as well. They're going to have a busy mission, but a fun one. Next slide, please. So part of the reason I'm here, and I always tell people this, is we need you guys. NASA has, after you complete this incredible challenge, we want you to come join some of our Artemis student challenges, including Student Launch and Rover Challenge. Those are two that are very near and dear to my heart. They are tremendously fun. You get to do a lot of innovation, and you get to experience what life is like for a NASA engineer. We have internships, a huge different array of opportunities and things you get to see and experience. But the most important thing on this slide I want you guys to take away is that bottom right, is that career paths. If you want to be an engineer, a scientist, a pilot, astronaut, awesome. We need you because you are the next generation. But if you like to build stuff, if you want to weld, we need people who build the rockets as well. Technicians to put their hands on the hardware, electricians to wire it. We need those absolutely skilled sets as well. Trust me, you don't want me building anything anywhere. But if you love NASA and you love space exploration, but you think you're an artist or a writer, or you want to be an accountant, you think there's not a place for you, I'm telling you, you're wrong. We absolutely have a place for you. In fact, the graphic artist that I work with is just a few cubicles away from me. We have videographers, we have photographers. No matter what it is that you're interested in, work hard and come join our team because it's going to take all of us to go to Mars. Next slide, please. Now, I know you have a challenge, and so you may be wondering, where can I get some of these awesome images? We have a bunch of links for you. So nasa.gov/images or images.nasa.gov are two terrific places to get images, videos, and different audio. We also have videos on our NASA Plus or nasa.gov/NASA TV. But we also have some other really cool things like ringtones, such as this one. If you'll click one more time for me, please.
And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
So that is an actual ringtone. That was our launch audio that you can download. You can have it on your phone. You can use it in your exhibit. All of this stuff is free to download, so please feel free to use it and explore it. Next slide, please. One more video. This one doesn't have any audio. You're going to see what launch is like from the view of the rocket looking down. See that tower up there to the right? That's part of our lightning protection system to make sure that we protect the rocket from any lightning strikes. See our launch pad and our launch complex, and then we really are that close to the beach. In fact, when I was getting ready for one of the launch attempts, a former space camper of mine sent me a picture of SLS and the Artemis 1 vehicle from the beach. She had gone on a boat tour and taken a picture. I didn't even know you could do that. I guarantee you, next time I go down, I'm going to be doing that. So next slide, please. And this is my last slide. So here are some of our social media channels, our websites, and please, if you have any questions, I would love to absolutely answer them. It is truly an honor for myself to be here and for our team, and we wish you all the best of luck and have fun, because this is the coolest thing. Thank you for your time.
All right. Well, thank you, Will. I think we do have a couple people on here, and we are open to any questions if those do come into the chat. But let me go back. I'm going to share this again. Because there we go. Great. I do want to reiterate again, thank you so much for being here, but, it's all about the challenge, right? It's all about doing this and making sure that we're supplying additional content to these teams that are approaching this challenge in 3 separate different ways. And you've been so kind and gracious to us tonight to talk to us about, inspiring future generations and what we're doing right now in the space program and where we're going with it. So I do want to highlight again our challenge schedule. Registration has already closed, but round 1, those video proposals are due March 8th. The announcement of who advances through that round is March 15th. April 15th is the submission date for our round 2 video presentations. And then we will make selections and announce those moving into the final round on April 22nd. And then the final round does occur on May 18th. All of this information is in the packet that has been supplied to teams that have registered. Also, you can find this on our website at mohhc.org/design challenge. All of this can be located there as well. So again, any questions, you can definitely reach out to us here at the National Medal of Honor Heritage Center. But Will, thanks so much for being here. And let's see if we have any questions. I know we have a couple people on here. But again, this has been recorded, so our teams that couldn't make it tonight, this will be shared with them so that they can do this. I'll give it just a second. If you have any questions.
No problem. Once again, I really appreciate y'all having me, and to the teams, y'all, thank you for taking part in this challenge. It's awesome. Shows a lot of initiative on your part, and have fun with it. I can't wait to come see what y'all create. I'm just a couple hours away, so I'll definitely be up there checking out the new exhibit. So.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, just hitting back on some of the things that you talked about, I think one of the lines that really stuck with me was the photo of the Earth and the Moon, and that every footstep that's ever been taken is in this picture. That just blew me away. But again, in NASA, it's not just astronauts, right? Like, they get a lot of the glory, great. But it's all the engineers, it's all the designers, it's the accountants that you've listed here on the screen. It's everyone else, like, really building up what's happening, what gets those rockets to space, right? It's you telling the story, and that's what we want our students who are involved in this student challenge to really realize. There's obviously the design engineering process that goes on with building out these exhibits, but they're also storytellers. They're telling the story,
Absolutely.
history, and the future of space, inspiring generations, and just all of these Space Medal of Honor recipients that have, done something in their own way, and then the Challenger crew as well. But you're storytelling at the same time, so it's really a mesh of so many of these different careers. And it's a career that, a museum exhibit designer, I'm not sure many students have really thought about that as a career choice. So, you're a fantastic example of, maybe you're not that astronaut, but you're there telling the story and you're doing your part to actually get those rockets up into space and to inform the public about what's happening?
Well, people, the reason I got into this, y'all, is that I was in grad school studying rocks, and I realized that my classes actually helped me realize that there are people that write these articles because the engineers, the accountants, they need somebody to tell their story. And that's what got me into it. When I was teaching at Space Camp, we teach history lessons, and history lessons to me was story time. Let's tell the story about uh, about the Challenger crew, about the Columbia crew. In fact, my rival elementary school was Challenger. I went to Virgil Ivan Gus Grissom High School. Let's talk about Gus. Let's talk about these incredible heroes, not just as the heroes that they've done, but the incredibly fascinating people that they are.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Will, for being here with us. And those, our student teams that couldn't be here tonight, this will be shared with them so that they can view it. You know, this is especially important to those who are taking on option 3, which is to inspire future generations. But obviously, there's information that you've covered here that all of our teams can utilize. And we really appreciate your time. And thanks for being with us.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, my honor. Y'all have fun and good luck.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.